What if the very first moment of human existence wasn't lost to time? What if people have actually been there, traveled back through the fabric of reality, and witnessed the exact instant humanity began? It sounds impossible, but the 10 survivors you're about to meet all claim the same thing. They saw the first day. They remember it. And what they describe will shake everything you thought you knew about where we come from. Let's begin. Imagine this. You're a geologist standing at the mouth of a volcanic cave in Iceland. The air is cold and sharp. Your headlamp flickers against walls that haven't seen light in centuries. You take one step forward into the darkness, and then you're gone. Not missing, not lost. Gone. Transported to a world that existed before civilization, before language, before humanity even knew what it was. That is exactly what Dr. Christopher Halldorson claims happened to him in the summer of 2019. And what he brought back with him defies every logical explanation. Christopher was 41 years old, a respected geologist leading a volcanic cave survey near Thingvellir, one of Iceland's most geologically active regions. His team had been mapping unexplored fissures for nearly 2 weeks when they discovered an opening that wasn't on any chart, a narrow passage descending deep into the earth. Christopher went in first. His radio signal cut out almost immediately. His team waited. Hours passed, then days. Search parties combed every meter of that cave system. They found nothing, no equipment, no footprints, no body. It was as if Christopher Halldorson had simply ceased to exist. Then, 72 hours later, a passing motorist found him wandering barefoot along a road 40 kilometers away. He was severely dehydrated, disoriented. His clothes were torn and caked with dirt that didn't match any soil in the region. And when they asked him what happened, what he said next would change everything. Christopher claimed he had walked through a door of light inside the cave. One moment, he was in darkness. The next, he was standing on a vast warm savanna beneath a sky that looked somehow heavier, denser, older. There were no cities, no roads, no signs of modern life anywhere. Just endless grass, scattered trees, and a river winding through the valley below. And near that river, he saw them, a small group of figures, primitive, naked, moving slowly through the tall grass. He watched them for what felt like many days. He saw them gather food, attempt to shape stones into crude tools, huddle together at night beneath stars arranged in patterns he didn't recognize. He believes he witnessed the very first humans learning how to survive. But here's where it gets truly disturbing. When medical teams examined Christopher, they discovered something impossible. His fingernails had grown approximately 3 weeks in just 72 hours. His bloodstream contained trace minerals that geologists could not identify, compounds that simply don't exist in any known modern environment, and clutched in his hand was a small stone, smooth and dark, unlike any rock type cataloged anywhere on Earth. Where did it come from? How did he get it? And if he was only gone for 3 days, why did his body age nearly a month? Christopher gave only a handful of interviews before withdrawing completely from public life. In his final recorded statement, he described one moment that still haunts him. He was crouched behind a ridge, watching the group of early humans near the river, when one of them suddenly stopped, turned. The figure looked directly at him, not past him, at him, as if it knew he was there, as if it understood he didn't belong. Christopher said he felt something in that moment he couldn't explain. A recognition, a warning, a message passed across hundreds of thousands of years in a single glance. Today, the fissure where Christopher disappeared has collapsed. The entrance is sealed beneath tons of volcanic rock. Some say it was a natural event. Others aren't so sure. Christopher himself reportedly tried to return to the site multiple times before it closed. He was convinced he could find the passage again, convinced he was meant to go back. Was this man really transported to the dawn of humanity? Did he walk among our earliest ancestors and somehow return? And if so, what did they see when they looked at him? A stranger from the future? A ghost? Or something else entirely? The answers remain buried beneath the Icelandic earth. And Christopher Halldorson isn't talking anymore. But trust me, this was only the beginning. The next case goes even deeper into the impossible. What if your own government sent you back in time? Not to change history, not to prevent a disaster, but to witness the very first moment of human existence and bring something back. It sounds like the plot of a science fiction movie, but according to one dying soldier, it actually happened. And the secret he carried for nearly 40 years is one of the most chilling confessions ever recorded. In the spring of 2023, a frail elderly man named Marcus Delane lay in a hospital bed in Phoenix, Arizona. He was 81 years old. His lungs were failing. Doctors said he had days, maybe hours. But before he died, Marcus insisted on recording one final statement. What he revealed in that interview has never been officially acknowledged by any government agency. And yet, those who have heard it cannot stop asking questions. Marcus claimed he was a sergeant in the United States Army in the mid-1980s. In 1987, he was quietly transferred to an underground facility in the Nevada desert. No official name, no records, just a concrete bunker buried beneath miles of sand and silence. There, he was introduced to a program called Project Genesis. He didn't understand it at first. They ran psychological tests, measured his stress responses, monitored his brain waves, and then they told him he had been selected because of something called a temporal stability score, a metric that supposedly measured how well a human mind could survive displacement through time. Marcus described being led into a massive circular chamber. The walls were lined with rotating electromagnetic rings, spinning in opposite directions, humming with a low vibration he said he could feel in his teeth. 2 other soldiers stood beside him. They were strapped into harnesses. And then it began. The rings spun faster. The air crackled. Marcus said he felt his body dissolve, not painfully, but completely, as if every cell in his being was pulled apart and reassembled somewhere else. When he opened his eyes, he was no longer in Nevada. He was standing in a humid jungle. The air was thick and wet. Massive insects buzzed past his face. Birds he couldn't identify shrieked from the trees above. And in the distance, through a break in the undergrowth, he saw them. A small group of figures huddled together in a clearing, primitive, naked, barely human, but unmistakably alive. Marcus watched them for what felt like hours. He saw them eat, communicate in grunts and gestures, and then he witnessed something he still couldn't speak about without crying. A woman crouched beside a fire, surrounded by others, and gave birth. The first human birth he had ever seen. Maybe the first human birth anyone had ever seen. But here's what still haunts him. He wasn't alone in that jungle. The 2 soldiers who went with him were there too. One of them wandered off and never came back. The other returned with Marcus, but something was wrong. He couldn't speak. He couldn't eat. He died within weeks. Marcus was debriefed, threatened, and quietly discharged. He never saw the facility again. He was told to forget everything. But he never could. Why did the government want to send soldiers to the origin of humanity? Marcus believed they were trying to retrieve something, a genetic sample, a piece of biological information from the very first humans. He didn't know what they planned to do with it, but his final words in that interview still echo. They wanted to see how we started so they could control how we end. Marcus Delane died 3 days after the recording was made. His family claims that military officials visited his hospital room just hours before his death. No one knows what was said. The interview footage has circulated in private forums, but has never been verified. And Project Genesis, if it ever existed, remains completely buried. Was Marcus telling the truth? Did the United States government really send soldiers back to witness the dawn of mankind? And if so, what exactly did they bring back? Some questions are never meant to be answered. But that doesn't mean we stop asking. What if a medieval monk who lived over 600 years ago somehow knew exactly what the first humans looked like? Not through scripture, not through imagination, but because he claimed he was actually taken back in time and shown the dawn of humanity with his own eyes. It sounds impossible, but the document that proves this case exists, and what it contains has baffled historians, scientists, and the Vatican itself for decades. In 1987, a restoration team was working inside the Monasterio de San Juan de los Reyes, an ancient monastery in Toledo, Spain. Behind a crumbling wall in a forgotten storage chamber, they discovered a collection of manuscripts that had been sealed away for centuries. Most were unremarkable. Liturgical texts, financial records, but one document stood apart from the rest. It was the personal journal of Brother Alejandro de Avila, a Franciscan monk, dated 1372. and what was written inside would challenge everything we think we know about medieval knowledge. The journal was filled with sketches, dozens of them, detailed drawings of humanoid figures that looked almost but not quite human. Their brows were heavy, their posture slightly hunched, their hands gripped crude stone tools. These were not depictions of angels or demons. They were anatomically precise illustrations of early hominids, creatures that wouldn't be discovered by science for another 500 years. How could a monk in the 14th century have drawn something so accurate? The answer, according to Brother Alejandro himself, was written in faded Latin across the pages. He described a visitation. One night, he claimed, a being of light appeared in his cell and took him into what he called a river of light. He was carried through darkness and silence until he emerged in a place he described as the garden before the garden, a world with no cities, no walls, no sin, just endless golden grass beneath a sky so clear it seemed to sing. And there, walking slowly across the land, were the first people. Not Adam and Eve as Scripture described them, but something older, something rawer, something that had not yet learned to speak. One of his sketches shows a sunrise over a distinctive landscape, rolling hills, a wide river, scattered acacia trees. In 2001, a geographer compared the drawing to satellite imagery of East Africa. The match was astonishing. The sketch aligned almost perfectly with a section of the Rift Valley, a region now considered one of the most likely cradles of human evolution. Brother Alejandro had never traveled outside of Spain. He had no maps, no knowledge of Africa, and yet he drew it with haunting precision. But here's what truly disturbs researchers. Throughout the manuscript, one phrase is repeated exactly 7 times. They did not speak, but they sang. This idea that early humans communicated through musical vocalization before developing language is a theory that only emerged in modern paleoanthropology in the late 20th century. How could a monk in 1372 have known? Was it a guess? Divine inspiration? Or did he actually witness it firsthand? In 2004, Brother Alejandro's remains were exhumed from the monastery crypt as part of a historical preservation project. The examination revealed something strange. His bones showed unusual density patterns consistent with prolonged exposure to an unknown form of radiation, the kind of anomaly you might expect if a human body had been subjected to forces we still don't fully understand. Today, the manuscript is no longer in Spain. It was quietly transferred to a private Vatican archive shortly after its discovery. Access is heavily restricted. Officially, the Church has never commented on its contents, but some believe there were more pages that revealed even more about what Brother Alejandro saw, pages that were deliberately removed before the document was sealed away. Was this monk really shown the first morning of mankind? Did he witness humanity's origin through some kind of temporal displacement? And if the Vatican is hiding the rest of his testimony, what else did he see that they don't want us to know? The answers remain locked behind ancient walls, and the Church isn't talking, but the drawings survive, and they tell a story that refuses to be silenced. Imagine you have an identical twin, same face, same voice, same DNA. You've looked into a mirror of yourself your entire life. Now imagine one day, your twin goes through something unexplainable, and when they come back, they're no longer identical. Their face has changed. Their memories have changed. They remember things that haven't happened yet, things that happened before humanity even existed. That is exactly what happened to Daniel and Thomas Ericson, and what followed is one of the most disturbing cases of temporal displacement ever documented. In the autumn of 1998, the Ericson twins volunteered for an experimental consciousness study at a university in Stockholm. They were 26 years old, healthy, curious. The study involved extended sensory deprivation combined with guided meditation techniques designed to explore altered states of awareness. Both brothers were placed in separate isolation chambers. Monitors tracked their brain activity. The experiment was supposed to last 8 hours. Thomas emerged on schedule, groggy but fine. Daniel did not. His monitors showed irregular brainwave patterns. His body remained unresponsive. Researchers waited. 8 hours became 12. 12 became 20. Finally, after 27 hours, Daniel opened his eyes. But something was immediately wrong. He spoke in fragmented sentences. He kept repeating the same phrases over and over. The tall grass, the the red sky. The ones who walked before. When they asked him what he meant, he just stared at the wall and whispered that he had been there, at the beginning. Over the following weeks, Daniel began producing drawings, hundreds of them. Detailed sketches of early humans engaged in activities that matched no known historical record. He drew figures gathered around a body lying on the ground, hands raised toward the sky. He believed he had witnessed the first human funeral. He drew mothers holding infants, hunters tracking animals across open plains, rituals performed beneath stars that no longer exist in our sky. He described sounds, smells, sensations, the heat of the sun on his skin, the weight of the air in his lungs. He insisted it wasn't a dream. He had been transported somewhere real. But here's where things become truly disturbing. Within months of the experiment, Daniel's appearance began to change. His brow grew slightly heavier, his eyes set deeper, his jawline sharpened. Doctors ran genetic tests. Everything came back normal. His DNA was identical to his brother's. And yet, when you stood Daniel and Thomas side by side, they no longer looked the same. Thomas was horrified. He told researchers that looking at his brother now felt like looking at a stranger wearing a mask of his own face. Daniel claimed his body was remembering a different time. He believed that witnessing the origin of humanity had altered him on a cellular level, that some part of him had stayed behind in that ancient world. Thomas couldn't accept it. By 2003, he had cut off all contact with his brother. He refused interviews, refused to speak Daniel's name. The bond that had connected them since birth had been severed by something neither of them could understand. Today, Daniel reportedly lives in isolation somewhere in northern Finland. He rarely speaks to anyone. But according to those who have visited him, he has written over 6,000 pages describing what he calls the first century of man. The document has never been published. No researcher has been allowed to examine it in full. Some say it contains details about early human life that would rewrite our understanding of evolution. Others say it contains something else, something Daniel refuses to share because he believes the world isn't ready to hear it. What happened inside that isolation chamber in Stockholm? How did one brother return unchanged while the other came back carrying memories of humanity's first days? And why did witnessing the beginning transform Daniel so completely that even his own twin no longer recognized him? The answers remain locked inside a cabin in Finland, and Daniel Ericson isn't letting anyone in. If you're still watching, you're searching for something most people are afraid to find. But over 80% of viewers right now aren't subscribed. Don't miss what's coming next. Subscribe now. The next case is even more disturbing. What if a child could remember something that happened before they were born? Not a past life in the traditional sense, but something far older. A memory from the very beginning of humanity itself. It sounds impossible. Children can barely remember last week. But in 2011, a 4-year-old girl in rural Japan began drawing scenes so ancient and so accurate that researchers still cannot explain how she knew what she knew. Her name was Yuki Hayashi, and her story will leave you questioning everything you thought you understood about memory, time, and the origins of human consciousness. Yuki lived with her parents in a small village in Nagano Prefecture, surrounded by mountains and forests. She was a quiet child, shy, unremarkable in every way except one. She loved to draw, but the images she created were unlike anything her parents had ever seen. Instead of flowers or animals or family portraits, Yuki drew strange hunched figures with heavy brows and long arms. She drew crude shelters made of branches and stone. She drew creatures her parents couldn't identify, massive beasts with tusks and thick fur. When they asked her what she was drawing, she smiled and said the same thing every time. My first family. At first, her parents dismissed it as imagination, but as the drawings continued, they grew concerned. Yuki wasn't copying images from books or television. She had never been exposed to anything about prehistoric life, and yet her sketches were disturbingly accurate. A local psychologist named Dr. Kenji Murakami began documenting her work. Over 2 years, he collected more than 140 drawings. What he discovered left him speechless. Yuki's illustrations depicted extinct megafauna with anatomical precision. She drew stone tools in the exact configurations used by early humans. She sketched migration patterns across landscapes that matched regions in Africa she had never seen and never heard of. When asked how she knew these things, Yuki simply said she remembered. She had been there before the beginning. She was sent to watch. And then she was pushed into now. But the most chilling detail came during one of Dr. Murakami's recorded sessions. He asked Yuki who sent her. She didn't answer at first. Then she slowly raised her finger and pointed upward. "The ones who count the people," she whispered. She described a specific event she called the day the fire people came from the sky, beings of light who descended and watched as the first humans emerged. She said they were still watching, even now. One of her drawings contained a symbol that stopped researchers cold, an abstract spiral pattern repeated in the corner of the page. In 2014, an archaeologist recognized it. The same symbol had been found carved into the walls of the Chauvet Cave in France, one of the oldest known sites of human art, dating back over 30,000 years. Yuki had never seen those carvings. She had no access to them, and yet she drew the exact same shape at 4 years old in a village in Japan. By the time Yuki turned 7, the memories began to fade. She stopped drawing the figures, stopped talking about her first family. Today she is a teenager with no recollection of the images she once created, but she still suffers from recurring nightmares, dreams of being watched from above, dreams of standing in tall grass beneath a burning sky, while silent figures observe her from a distance. Dr. Murakami submitted his findings to an academic journal. They were rejected as unverifiable. His notes remain unpublished. But those who have seen them believe Yuki was not simply imagining things. They believe she was placed in our timeline as an observer, a witness sent from somewhere else to record the very first days of mankind. And then, once her purpose was complete, the memories were erased. Who are the ones who count the people? Why did they choose a child to carry memories of humanity's origin? And what exactly did Yuki see that was so important it had to be forgotten? The answers remain locked inside the mind of a girl who no longer remembers. But the drawings survive, and they tell a story that refuses to disappear. Picture this. You're a prisoner in a Soviet labor camp in the frozen wastelands of Siberia. It's 1953. The temperature is 40 degrees below zero. You haven't eaten a real meal in weeks. You're surrounded by death and despair. And then, without warning, your heart stops. You collapse into the snow. Everything goes dark. But instead of dying, you're transported somewhere impossible. A warm, sunlit savanna at the dawn of human existence. Now, imagine 5 other men collapsing at the exact same moment. And when you all wake up, you discovered you saw the exact same thing. That is the mystery of the Siberian 6, and what they witnessed has never been explained. In the winter of 1953, 6 prisoners at a remote gulag in eastern Siberia experienced simultaneous cardiac arrest during a violent polar storm. They were in different parts of the camp, different barracks, different work details. And yet, within seconds of each other, all 6 men collapsed. Their hearts stopped beating at nearly the identical moment. The camp physician, a man named Dr. Anatoly Voronov, managed to revive all of them. It should have been impossible. But what happened next was even more inexplicable. Over the following weeks, guards began noticing strange behavior. The 6 men, who had barely known each other before that night, started gathering together whenever possible. They drew the same symbols on the walls of their barracks: spirals, circles, shapes that meant nothing to anyone else. When interrogated separately, each man described the same vision: a vast golden plain beneath a sky that seemed to glow from within, a wide river cutting through the landscape, and near the water, a small group of figures, primitive, naked, walking slowly toward the rising sun. The details matched with terrifying precision. All 6 described the same direction of light, the same number of figures, the same strange humming sound that seemed to come from the earth itself. One man, a former teacher named Pavel Andreev, broke down crying during his interrogation. He said he watched a child being born, hands that had never held anything before, reaching out to receive new life. He called it the first cry of the first mother. He said he could still hear it echoing in his mind. Soviet authorities didn't know what to do with them. After Stalin's death later that year, the 6 men were quietly transferred to a psychiatric facility outside Moscow. They were never charged with any additional crimes. They were simply removed from the system and forgotten. But in 1992, when Soviet archives began to be declassified, researchers discovered their medical files. What they found inside raised more questions than answers. all 6 men shared a rare brainwave anomaly, a pattern that had never been documented before or since. A handwritten note in the margin of the file, presumably from a military scientist, read as follows: "Subjects may have accessed a collective origin memory. Further study forbidden. The note was never explained. No follow-up research was ever conducted. And all 6 men died within a decade of each other, each one listed with the same cause of death: cardiac failure. Only one man's personal writings survived. Pavel Andreev had smuggled pages out of the psychiatric facility and hidden them with his daughter before he died. In those pages, he wrote something that still haunts researchers today. We did not dream. We were taken back, and we were shown why it all began. His daughter has refused to release the full document. She says the world isn't ready. What happened to those 6 men in the frozen darkness of Siberia? How did they all see the same vision at the same moment? And what exactly did they witness that was so significant the Soviet government buried it forever? The answers remain locked in classified archives and a daughter's grief. But the symbols they drew on those barracks' walls have been found in caves across the world. Ancient caves, caves painted by the very first humans. The next case is one of the most disturbing we've ever covered. If these mysteries have you hooked, make sure you're subscribed. What's coming next might just change everything. Hit subscribe now. What would you do if you died and saw something impossible? Not a tunnel of light, not deceased relatives waiting to greet you, but humanity's distant past unfolding before your eyes like a movie you were meant to witness. Now imagine you came back to life and used what you saw to make a real archaeological discovery. A discovery so significant, it should have made you famous. Instead, it destroyed your career. That is the story of Dr. Emmanuel Okonkwo. And what happened to him reveals something deeply troubling about what certain powerful forces don't want us to know. In the summer of 2016, Dr. Okonkwo was leading an excavation in the Turkana Basin of northern Kenya. He was a respected archaeologist with degrees from universities in Lagos and Cambridge. His specialty was early human tool use. He had spent 2 decades digging in the dust, searching for clues about how our ancestors lived. But on a sweltering afternoon in July, his heart suddenly stopped. He collapsed in the dirt. His team performed CPR for nearly 4 minutes before his pulse returned. By every medical definition, Emmanuel Okonkwo was dead. And during those 4 minutes, he claims he went somewhere else entirely. He described floating above a landscape that looked both familiar and impossibly ancient. The same hills, the same basin, but no roads, no settlements, no signs of human civilization. Just endless wilderness stretching to the horizon. And there, emerging from a thick forest into open grassland, he saw them. A small group of hominids, not quite human, but close. They moved cautiously across the terrain, watching for predators, communicating in grunts and gestures. And then he witnessed something extraordinary. They gathered dry grass and branches into a pile. One of them struck stones together until sparks flew, and fire appeared. Not wildfire, not lightning, intentional fire, controlled fire, fire made by hands that were learning to shape the world. Emmanuel memorized everything: the distinctive rock formation to the east, the bend in the ancient river, the cluster of acacia trees where the group had sheltered. When he regained consciousness, he was frantic. He insisted his team abandon their current dig and move 2 kilometers north to a specific location he described in precise detail. His colleagues thought the cardiac arrest had affected his mind, but they followed him anyway. What they found changed everything. Buried beneath layers of sediment was an ancient hearth. Carbon dating placed it at approximately 1.5 million years old. It was one of the oldest controlled fire sites ever discovered. The archaeological community was stunned. Emmanuel Okonkwo had led them directly to a find that should have taken decades of systematic excavation. But instead of celebrating him, they began asking uncomfortable questions. How did he know exactly where to dig? His answer, that he had seen it during a near-death experience, was unacceptable. Within months, Emmanuel was quietly pushed out of academic circles. His colleagues distanced themselves. Funding dried up. A leaked internal memo from his university revealed that pressure had come from an unnamed private foundation. Someone with money and influence wanted Emmanuel Okonkwo discredited. But why? Today, Emmanuel lives in seclusion in a small village in Portugal. He rarely grants interviews, but he has written a book. It remains unpublished. The title is The Observation Point. Those who have read portions of the manuscript say it contains detailed descriptions of early human life that go far beyond what archaeology has confirmed. Some believe it contains information that certain organizations consider dangerous, information about humanity's origins that contradicts accepted narratives. In one of his final public statements, Emmanuel said something that still haunts those who heard it. "I didn't just see the past, I was meant to see it. Someone or something needed a witness." He believes his death was not an accident. He believes he was chosen to observe a specific moment in human history. And he believes whoever chose him is still watching, waiting for the right time to reveal more. Was Emmanuel Okonkwo really transported to the dawn of human fire? And if powerful forces work to silence him, what exactly are they trying to hide? The answers remain buried, just like the truth about where we really come from. What if you vanished into thin air and came back carrying something impossible? Not a memory, not a scar, but a life growing inside you that science says should never exist. A child conceived in a time before history. A child whose genetics don't match any population on Earth. That is exactly what happened to Elise Marchetti in the summer of 2001. And what she brought back from her disappearance has raised questions that no one can answer. Elise was 34 years old, an experienced hiker, a woman who had spent years exploring the rugged wilderness of the American Southwest. On a clear morning in June, she set out alone into Red Rock Canyon, Nevada. She had done this trail dozens of times before. She told her husband she would be back by sunset. She never returned. Search teams scoured the canyon for 11 days. Helicopters, dogs, volunteers combing every ridge and ravine. They found nothing. No footprints, no clothing, no sign of struggle or injury. It was as if Elise Marchetti had simply ceased to exist. Her family prepared for the worst. And then, on day 12, a passing motorist spotted her sitting calmly on a boulder beside a rural highway, 40 miles from where she had disappeared. She was sunburned, dehydrated, disoriented, but alive. When paramedics examined her, they discovered something that defied every law of biology. Elise was approximately 12 weeks pregnant. This would have been remarkable under normal circumstances, but medical records confirmed that Elise had been clinically infertile since childhood, a condition she had accepted decades ago. Pregnancy was supposed to be impossible, and yet there it was. A heartbeat on the ultrasound, a life growing where no life should exist. Elise's account of her disappearance was unlike anything investigators had ever heard. She claimed she had walked through some kind of barrier in the canyon. One moment she was on the trail. The next, she was standing in a warm, open grassland that stretched endlessly in every direction. The sky was a deep amber. The air smelled of rain and smoke. And in the distance, she saw them. A tribe of early humans. Primitive, watchful, but not hostile. She said she lived among them for what felt like many moons. They accepted her, fed her, treated her as what she called a watcher or spirit visitor. She observed their daily rituals, their hunts, their moments of tenderness and grief. She learned their rhythms even though she could not speak their language. And then one morning, she woke up on that boulder beside the highway, back in her own time, carrying something she couldn't explain. The pregnancy progressed normally. 9 months later, Elise gave birth to a healthy girl. But genetic testing revealed anomalies that specialists had never encountered, markers that didn't align with any modern human population, ancient sequences that seemed to echo lineages long extinct. When researchers requested further testing, Elise refused. She pulled her daughter out of the public eye entirely. In her only interview, given anonymously to a small podcast in 2008, Elise said something that has haunted listeners ever since. She is the bridge. That's all I'll say. When pressed for clarification, she ended the conversation immediately. Today, Elise and her daughter have vanished from public life completely. Some reports suggest they live under assumed names somewhere in rural Oregon. Others claim they have been contacted by government agencies interested in the child's unique genetic profile. What is certain is that Elise Marchetti has no intention of letting anyone study her daughter. Whatever the girl represents, her mother is determined to protect it. Was Elise really transported to the dawn of humanity? Did she conceive a child with ancestors who lived hundreds of thousands of years ago? And if so, What does that child carry in her blood? Some researchers believe she may hold genetic keys to understanding human evolution. Others believe she represents something else entirely, a message sent forward through time, a bridge between who we were and who we might become. The answers remain hidden. Elise isn't talking, and her daughter is growing up somewhere in silence, carrying a secret written in her very DNA. Imagine you're hiking through the Swiss Alps. The air is thin and cold. Glaciers stretch before you like frozen rivers of time. And then you notice something glinting in the ice, something metallic, something that shouldn't be there. You dig it out with your bare hands and realize you're holding a camera, corroded, ancient looking, but somehow still intact. You take it home. You recover the photos inside, and what you see changes everything you thought you knew about time, about travel, and about a man who may still be trapped in humanity's distant past. In the summer of 2018, a mountaineer named Lucas Brenner was trekking near the Aletsch Glacier when he spotted an unusual object protruding from the melting ice. Climate change had been exposing artifacts that had been frozen for decades, sometimes centuries. Old climbing equipment, lost personal items. But this was different. It was a digital camera, heavily weathered, its casing cracked and corroded, as if it had been exposed to conditions far harsher than a Swiss winter. Lucas brought it to a specialist in Zurich who managed to extract the memory card. It was damaged, but 14 images were recovered. What those images showed has never been explained. The first photographs appeared to depict a vast open savanna, golden grass, scattered trees, no roads, no buildings. No signs of modern civilization anywhere. The landscape looked almost African, but the metadata was too corrupted to confirm any location. The next several images showed figures in the distance. Humanoid, but not quite human. Their posture was slightly hunched. Their movements captured in blurred motion suggested they were traveling in a group. One photograph showed them gathered around what appeared to be a fire. Another captured a woman in the foreground, her body wrapped in animal hide, staring directly into the lens. Her expression was not fear, it was recognition. The camera model was identified as one manufactured in 2009, but the images it contained depicted a world that existed long before any camera should have been possible. How could modern technology capture scenes from prehistoric times? And who was behind the lens? The answer came in the final recovered image, a close-up of a man's face, his eyes wide with terror, his skin sunburned and cracked, his lips parted as if crying out. It looked like a desperate selfie taken by someone who knew they were running out of time. Facial recognition software was run against every missing persons database in the world. No matches. Whoever this man was, he had never been reported missing. He had no official identity. As far as any record could confirm, he didn't exist. But there was one more discovery. Tucked inside the camera casing, folded into a tiny square, was a handwritten note. The ink appeared modern, but the paper had degraded in ways that suggested exposure to millennia of environmental stress. The message was short, just 11 words. If found, tell them it worked. But I cannot return. Tell who? What worked? And why couldn't he return? Researchers have debated these questions endlessly. Some believe the man was part of a secret experiment, that he traveled intentionally into humanity's past to document the very first humans and gather evidence no one else could obtain. Others believe something went wrong, that he was stranded, trapped in a time so distant that rescue was impossible. The note wasn't a mission report, it was a goodbye. Today the camera is no longer publicly accessible. It was purchased by a private collector shortly after its discovery. The location is undisclosed. The images have circulated online, but their authenticity has never been officially verified or debunked. Some experts dismiss them as elaborate forgeries. Others point to details in the landscape, the anatomy of the figures, the specific species of vegetation, details that match paleoanthropological records with unsettling accuracy. Was this man a time traveler who succeeded in reaching the dawn of humanity? Did he document the very first humans with a camera that shouldn't exist? And if he's still out there, somewhere in the ancient past, is he still waiting to be found? One question lingers above all the others. Who was he meant to tell? And what exactly did he want us to know? What if 2,000 people around the world had the exact same dream on the exact same night? Not similar dreams, the exact same experience, the same landscape, the same figures, the same moment in time. And what if that dream wasn't a dream at all, but something far more disturbing? A coordinated observation of humanity's very first day, witnessed simultaneously by strangers who had never met, spread across 47 countries, and every time zone on Earth. That is exactly what happened on September 9th, 2022. And what those witnesses experienced has shaken researchers, governments, and sleep scientists to their core. It started as scattered reports on internet forums, people describing vivid dreams that felt too real to dismiss, a warm, golden light filling the sky, endless grasslands stretching to the horizon, a sense of being present somewhere ancient, somewhere significant. Within hours, the reports began multiplying, hundreds of people, then over 1,000, all describing the same thing. They hadn't just dreamed about the past, they had been there, watching, witnessing the exact moment humanity opened its eyes for the very first time. The details were staggeringly consistent. Witnesses described small groups of early humans emerging from a forest into open terrain. They moved slowly, cautiously. Their bodies were primitive, but their eyes held something unmistakably aware. Many witnesses reported the same specific image, a figure standing apart from the others, tall, silent, watching from a distance. Not one of the early humans, something else entirely. Several people claimed they made eye contact with this figure, and when they did, they heard a voice inside their minds. Not spoken, transmitted. The message was always the same. You are the memory now. Sleep research centers were flooded with inquiries. A team at a European institute began compiling testimonies, attempting to find patterns. What they discovered was deeply unsettling. The witnesses weren't describing the same scene from the same angle. They were describing it from slightly different positions, as if they had all been placed around a single moment in time, each one observing from their own unique vantage point, like an audience arranged around a stage, watching the same performance from different seats. Then the deaths began. Within 3 weeks of the event, 11 of the witnesses died under unusual circumstances: heart failure, sudden stroke, unexplained accidents, statistically improbable. Some researchers whispered that they had been recalled, removed from our timeline because they had seen too much. A leaked internal report from the Sleep Institute contained a single sentence that spread across conspiracy forums like wildfire. This was not a dream. This was a coordinated observation. But coordinated by whom, and for what purpose? No government has acknowledged the event. No official investigation has been announced, and yet, over 1,500 of the original witnesses have joined private online communities. They share notes, compare memories, attempt to reconstruct what they saw with increasing precision. Some report that the visions have continued, new dreams showing slightly later moments in human history. The first fire, the first burial, the first spoken word. They believe they are being shown humanity's timeline, one fragment at a time. And they believe they are not the first group chosen for this purpose. Throughout history, there may have been others, witnesses selected to observe and remember, carriers of a memory that spans millennia. Perhaps the prophets, the visionaries, the mystics who spoke of seeing the beginning and the end. Maybe they weren't mad. Maybe they were simply earlier versions of the same phenomenon. Today, the witnesses continue to meet in encrypted forums. They call themselves the observers. They believe something is watching humanity, something that has been watching since the very first day. And they believe that whatever is showing them these visions is preparing them for something, a revelation, a return, a moment when the memory they carry will finally be needed. What happened on September 9th, 2022? Why were 2,000 strangers shown the same impossible vision? And what does it mean that they were told they are the memory now? The answers are still unfolding, and the observers are still watching, waiting for the next piece of the story to appear. 10 survivors, 10 journeys backward through time. Each one claims the same impossible truth, that they witnessed the moment humanity first opened its eyes. Coincidence? Delusion? Or something far stranger? Maybe the beginning of our story isn't locked in the past at all. Maybe someone, or something, is still showing it to us, still watching, still choosing who sees. If you want answers, subscribe now, because this is only the beginning. What comes next changes everything.